Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting. We'll call this to order. Can we have our public announcement, please?
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
Okay, first item of business is approval of the minutes for November the 21st, and my record shows that everybody was present, so everybody's allowed to vote on that one. Is there a motion?
I motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Miles, second by Mr. Green. All those in favor signify by the upraised hand. That is unanimous. And in the way of announcements, Mr. John McKay has retired, so his vote wasn't needed. He's not going to be here today. There is a card going around, so yeah, if you can think of something cute and nice at the same time to say about him, you can put that on the card. Mr. Miller, this is going to be his last meeting, but we'll see how he performs before we say our niceties at the end of the meeting for him. Okay, we'll see what items we can take by consent. Item 2.1 is a one-step final plat located on the east side of 407th Street West. Is there anybody on the commission like to hear that item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Seeing none, we'll take that by consent. Agenda item 2-2, a one-step final plat, Eck Brothers Estates Edition. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that one?
I'm sorry.
Nope.
Mr. Chairman, apparently we have what's the agenda out in the.
Okay. Someone hand me a up. I was reading off the minutes of December the 5th. That will do it. Okay. Looks like it's going to be one of those meetings. Just buckle up and settle in. Okay, since the first one wasn't right, let's start over. 2.1, lot split, the Power Center Edition. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Take that by consent. If I'd have gone with that on, we'd have got through with a lot of consent items.
There you go.
Item 2-2, revised one-step final plat Ballpark Village Edition. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will take that one by consent. Agenda item 2-3, revised one-step final plat Isidro 4th Edition. Anybody on the commission want to hear that? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that? Take that by consent. Item 2-4, one-step final plat Red Rock Ranch Edition. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will take that one by consent. Agenda item 2-5, one-step final plat Alley and Cason's Homestead Edition. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that? Seeing none. Anybody in the audience wish to hear that? Take that one by consent. Agenda item 2-6, one-step final plat SC Edition located 1/8 mile south of West 29th Street North. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Also by consent. Item 2-7, one-step final plat Trinity Academy 3rd Edition. Anybody wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Agenda item 2.8, one-step final plat Canada Investments Edition. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? See none. Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Take that by consent. Item 2.9, one-step final plat Chance and Sons Transmission Edition. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that? We'll take that by consent. Going for a clean sweep here. One-step final plat EPC Real Estate Group. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Take that by consent.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve items 2-1 through 2-10.
Motion by Mr. Green, a second by Mr. Blick. All those in favor signify with the upraised hand. Passes 11-0. Public hearing items. Item 3.1, a vacation of multiple alley rights of way to allow for site improvements on property zones CBD Central Business District, generally located south of Douglas Avenue between Ellis and Greenwood Streets. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? We will hear that item. Looks like item 4.1 was deferred to January the 23rd. We will hear item 4.2. Item 4.3, conditional use amendment to expand area for vehicle sales on property zoned limited commercial, east side of Broadway and within a quarter mile south of East Harry Street. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? We will hear that item. And we will hear item 4.4, moving down to 4.5, a city conditional use to request group residence limited for 12 residents on property zoned SF5. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Seeing none, we will take that by consent.
Wait a minute, which one was that now?
That one was the 4.5 conditional use 2019-00046 for group residence.
Yeah.
You want to hear that?
I want to hear that.
Okay, we will hear item 4.5. Item 4.6, a conditional use to permit mining or quarrying Property approximately 900 feet north of East 63rd Street, south and west of South Clifton. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will hear item 4.6. Agenda item 4.7, conditional use for an accessory apartment on property zone single family 5 located south side of West 8th Street and 1 block east of North Hoover Road. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will take 4.7 on consent. Agenda item 4.8, county conditional use for an accessory apartment on property zone rural residential, generally located on the south side of West 101st Street North and west of North Meridian. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will take 4.8 on consent. Agenda item 4.9, city zone change by Trinity Academy from single family 5 to light commercial. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will take agenda item 4.9 on consent.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve items 4.6, 4.7, 4.8, and 4.9.
We have a motion by Mr. Green, a second by Mr. Blick. All those in favor of that motion signify with the upraised hand. Passes unanimously 11-0. Looks like our first item for today's business is agenda item 3.1, a vacation for multiple alley rights of way.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Philip Zevenbergen with planning staff. This application is a request to vacate multiple alleyways between Ellis Avenue and Greenwood Avenue south of Douglas, as you can see on the exhibit on the screen. The properties along Douglas are addressed 1501 through 1525 East Douglas. The property is zoned Central Business District. And the alleys consist of a mid-block east-west alley between Ellis and Greenwood. In addition, there's a north leg and then an easterly leg, which, as you can see on the zoning map here, the fact that the zoning and ownership is applied to this alley, we have reason to believe that it may have been vacated in the past. However, there is no record of this vacation, so it's probably in good proceeding to go ahead and pursue vacation of it anyway. All properties that but the alley, there's 2 separate owners. They have all signed the vacation petition indicating their consent to this. The alleys basically provide a horseshoe around this parking lot. That parking lot has access off of Greenwood, so by vacating the alleys, nobody is denied access to that parking lot. The applicant has indicated that they are looking to do site improvements. They did not give any more detail to that, both to me or even at the subdivision committee meeting, so I don't necessarily know what their intentions are for the site. As you can see by this aerial image, these green lines are a sewer line that run through all of the alleys. An easement shall be retained in order to accommodate maintenance of those sewer lines. In addition, Cox and Evergy have lines in the alley up here on the northern portion of it. That easement that's retained for the sewer line will cover them as well. This was heard at the subdivision committee last week and they approved it 4-0. With that, I can stand for any staff questions.
Any questions for Philip? Seeing none, can we have the agent or applicant come forward, please?
Chris Rose with Boffin Company, agent for the applicant. The applicant agrees with staff comments, and I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Philip? Excuse me.
I'll get you
Chris?
back for that one.
Yeah. Seeing none. Okay, thank you. Anybody from the audience wish to hear this item? Wish to speak? Did you have a question, Cindy? Okay. Okay. Okay, no questions. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve per staff's recommendation.
Motion by Mr. Blick, second by Mr. Dool. All those in favor signify with the upraised hand. Motion passes unanimously. Next item, please. 4.2. Zone change from single family to limited commercial.
Philip Zevenbergen, planning staff for the record. Zone 2019-32 was originally scheduled to be heard back in September. Per the applicant's request, it actually has been deferred twice. This application request is to zone 2 lots that are currently zoned single-family SF5 to limited commercial to allow for the highest and best use on the property. Each lot is approximately 1.5 acres, so the total acreage when both lots are combined is just under 3 acres in size. Each lot currently has a single-family dwelling that were constructed between the 1940s and 1950s in the Crestview Lakes Edition, which is this area right here. Recently, both of the lots have had portions of their lot purchased when the intersection at 21st and Oliver was improved. The property, one or both of these lots has been the subject of 2 previous zone change attempts, one back in 2013 and one in 2018. I'll get into the details of those in just a minute. Ultimately, those cases were denied by City Council. Something that's unique about this location is, as you can see to the south, it's the WSU Innovation Campus. It is zoned single-family SF5, but there's a university overlay, which allows the university the flexibility and the ability to accommodate their own needs with that. So there's a lot of things that can happen on the university within that zoning classification because of that overlay. Specifically more to the south, these 2 rectangles here are kind of the Brayburn retail area that they've been developing. Further south, it's not really indicated on this map, is where that recent hotel has been constructed. Nothing with the Innovation Campus has really been developed right at the corner at this time. As you can see on the zoning map, there's a large swath of limited commercial zoning on the east side of Oliver. However, if you were to look on the west side of Oliver, north of 21st Street, if this map were to be able to extend it all the way to Hillside, there is no limited commercial zoning west of Oliver on the north side of 21st Street. More specifically, you can see that all the lots that abut these subject property are zoned single-family SF5, and they are single-family homes. The limited commercial zoning to the east is a convenience store, gas station here, right here on the corner. There's a large indoor storage unit complex. They're actually currently constructing multifamily dwellings in this part of the site right now. The church property is zoned SF5. However, just this last closing date on Monday, we received an application to rezone this property to limited commercial. And there's a mix of zoning and uses further to the east as well. The case history with this in 2013, both lots 11 and 12, so this is lot 11, the corner property is lot 12, requested a limited commercial zoning. It went to the Planning Commission, or to the City Council, and was sent back to the Planning Commission per the request of the applicant. They amended their application and wanted neighborhood office instead. The Planning Commission denied that one as well. It went back to City Council with a 63% protest, and City Council denied it in February 2014. In 2018, just lot 12, so just the corner lot, a request to rezone it to general commercial was submitted. Planning staff reviewed it, and the Planning Commission reviewed it and recommended a limited commercial zoning with a protective overlay. That was sent to City Council. City Council sent it back to Planning Commission, asking them for clarification within their protective overlay. They did that. It was passed again by Planning Commission and sent to City Council. It was protested 41.9%, and which required City Council to have a 6-7 vote in order to either approve or deny it. And neither approval or denial motion received enough votes to make it pass either direction, and so it just kind of died for lack of an approved motion. Since the last zoning case, the Northeast Heights neighborhood which is from 21st Street to 29th Street and Oliver to Hillside. They got together with their city council person and worked through getting a neighborhood plan amendment adopted into the comprehensive plan. That plan amendment was adopted in May of 2019. And in there, it specifies 5 policies. I'll cover them very briefly here to provide guidance related to non-residential development of this corner. It's like they're seeing the writing on the wall a little bit, and instead of letting it happen just how it was going to happen, they wanted to make sure they had some say and provided some guidance for the future development of this corner. Policy 1, first and foremost, the neighborhood's position is to retain the existing land use pattern as much as possible. Policy 2 says that strip development along 21st Street or Oliver or strip zoning for development would basically be considered intrusive into the character of the neighborhood. Policy 3 identifies the specific location that they deemed acceptable for non-residential development if it were to happen. And it's not only the 2 subject parcels we're hearing about today, but also includes this third one to the north, which is not included in the zoning request today. It also specifies that if a zoning classification were to change, they would be acceptable with general office zoning or anything more restrictive. So general office being the least restrictive zoning classification that would be acceptable within this neighborhood amendment plan. It also gave stipulations on building height limitations at 35 feet, no windows above 12 feet on the north or west elevations of the buildings. Monument signs had to be limited to 8 feet, and lights could not exceed 15 feet and needed to be shielded to avoid light pollution. They also addressed landscaping, screening, and buffering. It required a 6 to 8 foot masonry wall on the west and the north property lines, 1.5 times the landscaping requirement, as well as a 15-foot landscaping buffer between the wall and the uses on the property. And policy 5 talked about submitting drainage plans to meet the current and future stormwater management practices. If you remember, back in October, we heard the rezoning case for this property to the west, and several concerns were raised of the current drainage issues that are in this property. And I believe that is the reason why policy 5 is in there, is making sure that as this property is developed commercially, obviously there will be more impervious surfaces that they're not going to be adding to the drainage problems that are already facing this neighborhood that they have right now. North Oliver is a 4-lane paved arterial. East 21st Street is a 5-lane paved arterial. As I mentioned before, this intersection has been recently reconstructed and improved with turn lanes in all directions, including 2 dual left turn lanes with signalized left turns, and all municipal services are available at the site. The comprehensive plan identifies this area as a mix of residential and commercial, which allows for kind of the complementary uses. Any type of redevelopment with residential would most likely be higher density in nature just because of the presence of commercial as well. And then kind of reversely so, the commercial development was usually going to be less intensive based on the proximity of residential uses. Primarily with the comprehensive plan, the guidance that we've been following is the neighborhood amendment that we have just been speaking of with those 5 policies. Regarding that, these 2 properties, as I mentioned before, are within the designated area that the plan amendment deems as acceptable for non-residential uses. And specifically stating that general office being the most intensive use or the least intensive use, potentially having more restrictive zoning being applied. Based on the facts and the considerations for this case, staff is recommending denial of the limited commercial zoning. In its place, however, we are recommending rezoning for general office with a protective overlay. I'll go generally over what the language of the protective overlay says. Point number 1 is a list of accepted land uses, so the uses that would be prohibited. Most of those would be out of character and inappropriate for the area. Such things as recycling stations, asphalt concrete plant, corrective facilities, golf course, heliport, as well as group home or manufactured homes. Several other items within the protective overlay specifically go back to those policies and put in place into like the rules that it would have to be limited to 35 feet in height. The monument signs could not exceed 8 feet. It would invoke the landscaping requirement of 1.5 times the code, the 15-foot buffer, the 6-foot, 8-foot masonry wall. In addition to the architectural standards of having a hipped or gabled roof and architecture that is in character with the neighborhood, and that building elevations would have to be submitted to planning for approval before any building permits could be pulled. Let me make sure I got everything. Oh, portable signs and off-site signs, banners, and string pendants would be not permitted, except for a banner sign within 30 days of a business opening. And the final one being that there would be no outdoor speakers or sound amplification systems permitted on the site. Based on these recommendations, or based on this information, like I said, staff is recommending a general office zoning without protective overlay. I can go through the pictures we have on the site. This is kind of looking at the far corner, looking towards the intersection to the east. This is 21st Street, looking towards the intersection of Oliver and 21st. This is looking at that gas station convenience store that's across the street. The subject properties are over here to the west. This is looking at one of the subject properties looking down 21st Street. We're on the university campus over here. This is the Brayburn retail area. This is again looking at that Brayburn retail area, and I believe I don't know if this is the hotel or the hotel might be beyond that, but there's nothing directly on the corner. This is looking directly at Lot 11 at the single-family home that currently exists at this site. This is looking directly at Lot 12. That's right on the corner with the single-family home that is at that site. This was heard by the District Advisory Board for District 1 on October 7th. They recommended denial of any zone change with a vote of 8-2. And I can stand for any questions.
Questions for Philip? Philip, question I've got, in the report that shows the adjacent zoning and land use south SF5 Wichita State University. What is the zoning for that land to the south, or can?
This right here?
Yes.
It's SF5 with the university overlay.
And what does the university overlay allow them to do with that area?
Whatever they want to accommodate their uses. It gives them the flexibility to accommodate the uses of the university.
So they're not restricted to residential?
Correct.
That's what I was looking for. Okay.
Because the Brayburn area, as you can see on this map, is also zoned single-family SF5, but it's the university overlay that allows them to accommodate those uses.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Thank you. Would the agent or applicant come forward, please? State your name and address for the record, and you will have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Robert Moody. I'm an attorney at the Martin Pringle Law Firm, 645 East Douglas here in Wichita. I represent the applicants DMP Land LLC and Senator Rip Gooch, who own the properties at issue. The application is for LC. Certainly, this is not the first time up for these parties in trying to get the best and highest value for their property that they own there. Initially, they started this process back in 2014, and there's been significant developments in that area since that point in time, as you've seen through some of the slides that have been shown here. In particular, WSU, they've gotten rid of the golf course that was there, the clubhouse that was there, and that's retail, includes shops and restaurants and things of that nature, in addition to a hotel that's being built on that property as well right now. Across the street to the east, on the northeast corner of that intersection, the Quick Shop has been put in place since the initial application, as well as currently they've even got a four-story apartment building being constructed as we speak. So the population density is increasing over there in that area. And that's all the applicants are seeking. And this application is to get the highest and best value for their property. In 2018, there was a recommendation that went out for LC. And that's what we're seeking again at this point, is to get that recommendation. Considering all the recent developments, it was mentioned that the writing was on the wall. This area is prime for development. This area of town We've been talking about economic development in that area for a long time. What a LC rezoning would allow the property owners to do is to get the highest and best use of that value and bring something beautiful to that intersection of that neighborhood where all this other commercial development is going on. Really not too much more to add. Senator Gooch, he's 96 years old. He's lived in that place for 40 years. Mr. Marks, he owns that property, the lot 11 that was spoken of. He's on that property for 40 years. But now is the time. It's that the area is developing. And right now, kind of one of the holdups is getting this thing rezoned so that they can get development and plan in place for what's actually going to go there. But certainly they want to maintain the integrity of that neighborhood. They want to put something beautiful there that they can be proud of as well. And so with that, we would request the LC recommendation. I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Moody? Mr. Richardson?
Are your clients essentially saying it's LC or nothing?
They are not saying that. Certainly the highest, they're limited, obviously, by the just general geo rezoning. But certainly what they want is the LC so that they can, have different opportunities and get the highest and present use and value for their property at this point.
Additional questions for the speaker?
So how are the residents currently occupied, or they've been vacant for a while? Or
Lot 11 is currently vacant. Lot 12, Mr. Gooch, he still resides there.
Mr. Blick?
Do you agree with staff's recommendations? There's listed 10 of them that are on there. I noticed that number 2, it talks about a 6 to 8 foot masonry wall. Are you in agreement with all the recommendations?
We think that there can be a protective overlay that will work and satisfy the requirements of, I understand that the neighbors have some concerns and things of that nature, but they're willing to, if they can get LC, they're willing to work within the framework of certain limitations in that regard.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hold it just a moment. Mr. Green?
So if we were not to approve the limited commercial, but did approve the general office, I know that's not what you're wanting or what you're asking, but would that be acceptable?
That's something to be determined. Certainly they, Senator Gooch in particular is looking to get the highest and use and value for that property. He's 96 years old. He's not wanting to wait around too much longer for this to go through. But that would have to be a determination that would be made once the decision is made.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This time we'll open the floor up to comments from the audience. Please state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes. We did not go over this specifically except the comments early at the beginning of the meeting, but try to avoid repeating comments from other speakers. And if you'll state your name and address for record, ma'am, we'll get started.
Okay, I'm trying to find my map.
While they're doing that for the audience, we do have a computer up there with a mouse, and it's much easier for us if you use that rather than pointing at the screen. And then also speak into the microphone so that we can record your comments.
Right, I don't know where Jim,
Staff will help you just as they're doing right now.
Scott, do you know where Jim put? Yeah, I don't know where he put that on the show. I apologize. Cause I don't, yeah, he's in the control room. But I don't know.
Okay, I really need it, so what can I do?
I don't know where he had put it. Just leave that alone for a second. Let him try to find it. He's working in the back.
Okay, he's fine.
Philip, if he didn't receive them yesterday, they won't be there.
It was Monday AM I sent it in, and I got acknowledgement they received it, which I requested.
And if you want to take a break and we'll have somebody else speak and we'll see if we can find that and give you another chance.
Okay.
We have another speaker. If there's no one else, we'll just wait till we get, oh, go ahead, okay.
Mr. Gooch.
Mr. Gooch, is that, your time has expired, sir? So your opportunity has expired. We're looking for opposition at this point?
But he's
Yeah.
represented, he's been represented by counsel.
Yeah, yeah. Go,
You're representing.
My name is Craig Tolson. I am at 4 Crestview Lakes Estates. Basically, my property is here. I am adjacent to these properties, and what I guess my biggest fear in all of this is that in my 28 years of being out here, approximately, that I've just observed blight, basically, up and down 21st Street, and the most that I have seen is the Quick Shop going in. It appears that Wichita State is developing the land, but we have no guarantees of what's going to happen. It sort of shocked me that the overlays or the protective overlays state that there's not going to be any helipads, but we've had a couple of helicopters, well, 4, I think, park in here and give rides. I didn't know of that, but it does shock you when helicopters fly over and land, okay, in adjacent properties. So, I don't know what to say except that myself, Donna Sweet, are concerned, very concerned, that this could develop into another undeveloped piece, and it intrudes in to our neighborhood. It's the only thing that intrudes, and I know I have only 3 minutes, but it's like the plan amendment stated that I believe it's item 1, that rezoning and conversion of existing single-family resident properties and low-intensive non-residential uses of more than intensive zoning, it says it should be discouraged. And so we're discouraging that. Thank you for your time.
thank you. Is there any questions for the speaker?
Yeah.
Mr. Richardson?
Appreciate your position there. How do you feel about the general office zoning as a buffer, if you will, as opposed to light commercial? Do you think that would be an acceptable compromise, if you will?
If it was left to me only, I would say I don't want to see anything commercial. But if we've got I don't want to hold back the owners of the property either from some advantage for them. We as a homeowners association, we feel that if something like a bank or I believe those are one of the things that we discussed, something small like that would not be too intrusive. It would not bring large amounts of traffic. We already have issues of people getting lost, trying to get in here, coming down here, turning around in our yards and that kind of thing, because it's difficult, and the development of that corner did not help. It didn't. It really didn't. So we would like to discuss other possibilities, and raising it to an LC is not one of those that we're interested in. So,
Mr. Florence? Do you currently have
problem with flooding?
Do we have a problem with flooding? These, gosh, our ponds in here we've dug this one out once, and this is on our dime. And we are now starting to see a greater buildup again of water that's coming out. Gosh, I lost the mouse again. It comes out over the edge and gets closer to our road, okay? And we have no assistance. These were Army Corps lakes, but the Army won't come through and dig them out. I don't know. Wichita State had enough money to develop theirs. They took out, it appears that they took out ponds, and when they took out, and or at least they've reestablished them. But we have no way of absorbing the extra water, and I don't know as it's allowable to have, well, one of the properties has a pond, has the semi-pond here because it's a residential. But when you develop, and one of my fears was in an LC is that there is no pond necessary. I don't know where that water goes. It looks like it's going to go into our lakes or down 21st, down Oliver. So very, very hesitant to embrace something like this.
Additional questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else wish to speak on this issue? Ma'am, if you would come back up, we'll have to apologize because we've lost whatever information that you'd sent to us. So can you give us your best shot with what you have?
Best shot. You can kind of see that. That's the map.
Okay, if you could go to this microphone, please.
That's from Hillside to Oliver past.
Okay, could you state your name and address for the record?
Brenda Stevenson, 4723 East 27th Street North, Northeast Heights Neighborhood Association. We're here year after year because the northwest corner of 21st and Oliver, trying to rezone the neighborhood for development in an area that does not support what they keep requesting. We are here because they ignore the established amendment to the comprehensive plan as laid out by Philip. The petitioner for limited commercial, where's this? Okay. Which this is map number 8, point out there is limited commercial on the northeast corner of Oliver, but not on their neighborhood's northwest corner. They failed to state that the limited commercial on the northeast corner, all of this area, has failed to succeed. Businesses move in and out and often. Right here where that Philip mentioned the apartments going in, they actually demolished limited commercial buildings for those apartments. And what my map showed is that this area has apartments over here, apartments here, and then clear down, on my map, it shows more north to 96, that there are more apartment complexes all on Oliver. And the most recent was okayed last month on 28th and Oliver with a 100-year retention pond because the neighborhood is downhill from 21st Street to the Chisholm Creek floodplain. And this was set up in the 40s by the city using this as their storm water drainage. So that is my concern, where all the water saturates when you do the heavier development other than general office. There's also, the flooding down there, they've already put in a $400,000 project to shore up the tributary to homes and roads, flooding right behind the new development at 28th and Oliver. Brooks Middle School children and parents have to maneuver the flooding. Blocks of neighbors dealing with water in basements, sinking driveways. As on my block, the home's backyards flood and sump pumps and basement work overtime, all due to the constant high water level as the water goes from right here, starting at WSU, even further up or down south, and goes north all the way. So,
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, ma'am. We do appreciate your coming and apologize for losing your information. Any other speakers? Please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Scott Langenberg, 5 Crestview Lakes, Wichita. This is my property right over here. This corner here comprises of 6 properties along Oliver, plus the 10 around the lakes. That's our homeowners association. And we are part of Northeast Heights Greater Neighborhood Association, which is basically the square mile there between Oliver and Hillside, 21st and 29th. I wanted to say, first of all, Merry Christmas, just to get off on the right start. I forgot to say that, but this meeting was moved from 2 months ago to be, I think, purposely put here at this time so that we'd have less people against it here. And I can tell you there are several people that are not here because of that move to this time frame. One of the options you could have would be to move this meeting to after the holidays to have more input, but that probably won't happen. But something to think about. If this goes through, we will be forced to put petitions out there. We will probably do petitions anyway because we'll want it to have those in place for the city council meeting. But the last 2 times there was a great number of petitions, and I can tell you right now that we will be getting petition from this one. Whoops. How do I go back here? There we go. There will be petition from this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So you're going to have a great number just in the immediate adjacent area here, and then we will have more petitions from the surrounding Northeast Heights Neighborhood Association. So keep that in mind when you make your decisions. We kind of, as the Northeast, as Crestview Lakes homeowners, as a majority, kind of believe in the all or nothing principle for the most part. We feel like this corner should be totally left intact or be taken as a whole. So something else to kind of think about. That's why we're kind of hesitant to let the dominoes fall, if you want to call it that. We're kind of in this predicament partially because of WSU, but also because the city, when they redeveloped this corner right here, didn't give proper access for this corner to be developed into the kind of commercial property that they want. There's limited access due to the medians they put in here and here. There's only a left turnout here if they would have it, and a right turnout, or I'm sorry, right turnout there and a right turnout there if they would come in and make that limit commercial. Although having
Sir,
these two.
Your time has expired.
Okay.
Any questions for the speaker? Mr. Richardson?
Can I be given 20 more seconds?
You said leave it as it is or taken as a whole. What do you mean by that, and what are the boundaries when you say taken as a whole? I didn't quite understand what you meant by that.
I prefaced by saying the Crestview Lakes is 16 properties here. And in the past, there's been discussion on potentially somebody coming in and commercializing, say, like this side over here. And we've taken the approach we would, consider something if the whole corner was to go. If somebody, in other words, a more proper way to develop the corner would be to take a big chunk and develop it as a whole rather than piecemeal it,
Yeah,
like it has happened over here.
I understand that. It's probably difficult because they're all individual owners, are they not? And the lakes are
Right,
owned
16.
by the homeowners association. Is that, am I understanding that? The lakes themselves is common ownership?
Right.
So that'll be a difficult process. I've thought about that as well, and obviously that would make a lot of sense if there were a way to make that happen.
Yeah,
But
a big company could do that.
the only way that would probably happen is if all the neighbors get together and decide they're gonna put their houses on the market at the same time and.
No, commercial developer would come in and
Well,
talk to them.
if you've ever been involved in trying to assemble land, that's a really tough process, if you
It's-
have reluctant owners, so.
Yeah, it's been brought to our attention at least once already in the past 5 years.
Mr. Foster?
Mr. Chairman, the speaker requested an additional 20 seconds. I would request another minute for the speaker, and if I need to put that in a motion, I'd be glad to.
Consider that a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor, show with uplifted hand. Sir, you have 1 more minute.
Okay, great. I was just going to say, the other point I had is we have made an offer in the past to the owners of number 11 to try and buy them outright to solve this issue, but that has not been accepted. Obviously, they're going for the higher end rather than trying to sell it as a residential corner.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please. State your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello again. I'm Julia Falke, 3 Crestview Lakes Estates. Yep, we're back again. This is a really difficult process for all of us. I guess that I'll go through and I'll just make some comments about maybe other comments that have been made. The lakes are a part of the city's stormwater management system, but we have to take care of them. And when WSU did all of their development, and they did the development on the road at 21st and Oliver, we had a tremendous amount of silt and sediment dump into our lakes that we're going to have to take care of. And so, yes, the water stuff is becoming an issue for us again, but it's an issue for us personally of our homeowners association that has to take care of that. The other thing is that it is a private drive that we have to take care of, and it was brought up that we have traffic issues because people use it to turn around, and if they can't get through the drive, they just drive into people's yards and turn around there because they're big lots, and I guess they just feel entitled that they can do that. In years past, when this has come up, there was some suggestion of maybe gating, helping to purchase gates for us so that we could try to control the traffic some. That's not in this particular proposal that has come forward before you this time. WSU, they tore down the golf course, and supposedly there was supposed to be there was supposed to be development on both sides of the lakes. Right now, they've only been able to develop the one, and they had their first captive tenant, which was the bookstore that was moved over. And then we have one restaurant, and we have another restaurant that's going in that's not open yet, and a glorified ATM, and empty space. And so it has not developed as WSU put forward that all of this was going to happen. So we'd really like to see WSU and the Innovation Campus be successful and get that developed before you start encroaching onto the neighborhood. It talked about all or nothing, and it's nothing. And don't be fooled. The applicants at the DAB meeting went on the record and made it very clear that it was limited commercial for them, and that was the only thing that they would accept. So my fear is that even if you do adopt a general office or a neighborhood office, then I have a sneaky suspicion that somebody can come back in later and say, well, we haven't been able to develop it that way, so now we need to go to limited commercial. And now that it's been developed, or it's already been approved for one level of commercial, it's just going to slide right into the limited commercial. And I think that would be really a shame. So we would ask that you would just deny this yet again. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Mr. Foster?
Do you happen to know from a drainage standpoint, will the runoff from both these properties end up in your ponds?
Probably some of it will. I don't know what the plan is. Anytime they're going to increase some impervious substance, then it's got to go somewhere. I know that they did do improvements on 21st and Oliver, but I know that it does run down now through those lots, and the, let's see. Okay, so not that one. This one right here has got a holding pond that was required when it was built. This is number 14. And it's got a holding pond that was required because of the water that drains down through the properties. And then the next one is Mr. McAfee's place, and he ends up with a soggy front lawn constantly. It's like a bog. So it goes that way. I know that Kate and Byron over here at number 2 have ended up with a lot of standing water in their yards, just as it is right now. So all I can tell you is my opinion is, yes, it is going to have an effect. If it comes this far, then it's going to end up in our lake. Everything on 21st drains into our lakes. So although they have increased the inlets into the stormwater system, then that may take it out of the roads, but it puts it in our lakes. So yes, and we have had trouble. If it breaches the dam, it's our problem. It's not the city's problem. We have to rebuild the dam. So yes, it is also a fear for us of the expense. That honestly, we as a small homeowners association, and we all own a 16th of the parks and lakes. The HOA does not own it. The property owners all share in the common property, and we all own a 16th. It's on our deeds.
Additional questions for the speaker? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to commissioners, water and drainage is a plating issue, not a zoning issue. So something that there's a process for taking care of that. Any additional speakers? Please state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Falke. I'm at number 3 Crestview Lakes Estates. I am speaking as the president of the Crestview Lakes Homeowners Association, and of which this petition is a part of. Let's get back here. I think this map is a little bit misleading. All of this area here, let's just not cut to the chase, this should be red. This whole neighborhood, and now we hear that this corner has been applied to be rezoned as limited commercial. This neighborhood's bleeding limited commercial, and a lot of this is still as of yet to be developed. So what we're really talking about here is being good neighbors, and we're talking about highest and best use. And highest and best use comes into play, for a majority of people. Highest and best value, as their attorney alluded to, would go to the property owners. So you guys have the difficult position of understanding what's happening here. But if we're talking about barriers and you put some red right here, even putting general office or any kind of color, as Julia said, we are concerned that it will eventually turn red. This neighborhood is the Great White Hope. This is the Red Sea. These are the boundaries. They should stay that way. Thank you.
Just say the microphone, please. Any questions for the speaker?
Any questions?
Sort of question I've got is that, I mean, I understand the desire to keep this as a buffer, but the result of that is that you force an individual, I mean, right now it's residential. Who would want to live on that property as a residential use when you have got what is obviously commercial and a pretty advanced commercial on all sides? To me, that doesn't seem fair that we put the burden of creating a buffer for you on this one individual. So I'm, somewhere there's got to be a balance of some kind of commercial use here that would allow them to get some of their value out of that property. Does that make sense? Am I talking out of
No,
my hat?
you're not talking out of your mouth. That's why I say you guys have to make that decision. I'm speaking on behalf of a majority of the homeowners, not all the homeowners necessarily. But, when we're talking about being good neighbors and coming to the table, this entire mile section came to the table and gave you 5 potential options. And all we're saying, as the majority of the homeowners in that immediate vicinity, that we feel our option is nothing there at this point. It's up to you guys to be the bad guys and decide what needs to happen one way or the other.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Florence. We got one more question.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
When was the last time you engaged with those property owners about purchasing that property?
It hasn't been during any part of this current petition. They had requested to meet with the Greater Northeast Neighborhood Association at our meeting, I believe it was August. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it was before the last, before this was deferred. And then they didn't show up to that meeting. The only meeting they've been at in this process was that DAB meeting that Julia alluded to, where they basically said limited commercial is what we're going for.
Any additional questions? Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Becky Jenick. I live at 5520 West 37th Street South, Wichita. I don't live in the area. I did used to, but somebody just asked a question and I thought I would answer it. A lot of times we ask redundant questions at this meeting, like who would want to live there? Based on the number of residents that I see along Oliver that don't seem to be going anywhere, that always maintain occupancy, I would say a lot of people would want to live there. So don't try to justify your actions when the community is telling you we don't want something with, well, nobody else would want to live there. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Next speaker, please. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the applicant for rebuttal, and you will have 2 minutes.
Thank you. First off, I'll address the scheduling issue. I can assure you there's no ulterior motive in moving this hearing to today's date. It was simply a scheduling thing. So just wanted to address that. Mr. Chairman, you pointed out one thing that I wanted to note was that the drainage issue and things of that nature, whole separate process, not why we're here today. We're here about the rezoning issue and that's it. These 2 individual applicants actually combined their properties for the purpose to be able to get highest and best use. And so as to whether or not they would both be willing to accept GO or LC, for this purpose, they're wanting the LC, but they may or may not want to. That's why it rests on what the decision and outcome is of the hearing or what the recommendation is coming out of this. That's pretty much, well, the other thing I will address is that the city at one point did purchase the frontage of these 2 properties. When they did make that purchase, they gave value for LC. So there's all these LC everywhere where it's engulfing this neighborhood. These applicants should be able to benefit from that as well. And I'll take any questions.
Any additional questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bring it back to the commission. Mr. Blick.
I just have a question for staff, because I know in policy 5, it does talk about the drainage, and it said that they'll have to provide a site plan. I noticed that it's like Chick-fil-A out west and then CV Pharmacies has to have like an underground to catch stormwater. It's based off of square footage or acreage or something. What's that threshold in between there that they would have to versus go to a retention pond?
Well, I'm not a drainage engineer, but the policy is that this property, if it were redeveloped commercially, cannot have more water run off of it after it's redeveloped than in its present state. And so whether that's a detention pond, whether that's a holding tank or some other way, they have to hold their water and then slowly release it per the policy.
And that's all based off of a drainage plan that has to be approved by the city.
Yes, prior to getting a building permit, since this property is platted, they would have to submit a revised drainage plan that would be reviewed by the drainage engineer.
Additional comments? Mr. Foster?
Dale, would you go a little bit further on that? Because in item number 9, referring to the site plan, does drainage need to be mentioned? I mean, the site plan deal spells out a lot of stuff, but should the drainage be mentioned in the conditions?
I guess you could look at it in both ways. I mean, they're going to be required to do it whether it shows on the site plan or not. But the drainage plan is the expensive part of platting, as you're probably aware. And so they probably have not done the studies that it would take to accurately reflect it on the site plan. But in order to get a building permit, they will have to have an approved drainage plan.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
If there isn't any further questions, did you have another question or comment? I was going to make a motion that we approve this site for limited commercial zoning with the protective overlay that is stated in our packet.
And so you're recommending the applicant's request over the staff recommendation. Okay, I would second that motion. Mr. Foster?
I would offer a substitute motion, and that would be to follow the staff recommendation for the general office zoning, and also make a stipulation in condition number 2 of the overlay that it require the 8-foot wall.
I'll second that.
There's a second to that. Questions or comments about the substitute motion?
Yeah.
Mr. Green?
The reason why I made the motion the way I did is I know that this intersection and these lots have come before us on more than one occasion. And I believe that the last time it came to us, we approved a limited commercial. The city denied that request, and they sent it back to us, and I didn't see it again, but we are now seeing it a year and a half later. And I just think that if we did that limited commercial with the protective overlay, then it's going to accomplish the things that need to be accomplished for all parties.
Mr. Foster?
This strikes me as being similar with the case that we just looked at for the South Central neighborhood. And part of that process was to involve the neighbors and have an updated plan. And we listened to that plan. And that involved consideration for the car lots and things. So I think it's a similar situation here. And I think we should, just as good planning principle, pay attention to our plans and proceed with the general office as the highest use.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I agree. We've heard this 3 or 4 times. It's not an easy decision. I guess the only thing I'm saying is it's drastically changed that area ever since WSU did what they did. I don't think it's going to make any difference whether we go office or if we go like commercial. The applicant's got a lot of work to do to probably develop these 2 lots. Maybe as far as trying to acquire some other property if a developer comes in. And I'm not so sure it's not better to make it LC so that if they do get a developer, they might possibly end up buying some additional lots.
Mr. Dewell?
I am reluctant to vote in favor of the substitute motion for the staff's recommendation for something that is not what the applicant requested. We don't have any indication that the applicant is really interested in that. And I just think if they want that, that's what they ought to be presenting to us.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Seeing none, we have a substitute motion to approve staff recommendation with some additional stipulations. All those in favor of that motion signify with the lifted hand. Leave it up while we count. Okay, just leave them up while we count those. We got that?
Oh, we got 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
Okay, I'm showing 5. Those opposed, same sign.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, so that motion, the substitute motion fails 5 to 6. That brings us back to the original motion to approve limited commercial in essentially the same way as the applicant requested. Mr. Richardson?
I think we need more clarification on what we mean by the protective overlay. I'm not sure we have that stated here. We don't have a protective overlay stated for LC. So I'm a little concerned about what it is we would be approving.
Mr. Green?
What I was referring to, Mr. Richardson, were the 10 items here that are listed upon the staff's denial of general office with the establishment of this protective overlay. And I'm saying to go with a limited commercial with these 10 items.
Yeah, my concern there is that we don't have a chance to look at other exceptions that might be appropriate because they're allowed by right in LC. I don't know that we've thought this all the way through. And I think the staff has some more work to do if that's the case, because we have a lot of possibilities for what we'd be saying is we're going to approve everything by right in LC except for these exceptions. And I think there may be a lot more of them we'd want to think about if we're going to do this on LC. There'd be a lot of other uses that would be by right that the staff might recommend that we accept as well. So I'm not sure we're ready for that at this point.
Staff want to weigh in before I continue on with the commission?
Philip, help me out here, but the way it reads now is, as the motion is made, it would be zoned to limited commercial, but the only uses that would be permitted would be general office and, well, no, and it says with the following exceptions, so Mr. Richardson's correct.
Mr. Richardson, those exceptions were based off of a general office zoning recommendation.
So
Going to limited commercial opens the door for a significant number of uses that are not allowed in general office that staff has not provided recommendation on use exceptions.
Well, that would be the reason I can't support this motion at this point. I think we're going to allow something we might not otherwise want there. I mean, there's a number of uses you can think of off the top of your head that you don't really want there. So we're not going to be helping the neighborhood at all in that case.
Okay, one of the options would be to defer and allow the applicant to develop a protective overlay under limited commercial.
Yeah, we'd need a different motion probably to do that.
You need the motion to be withdrawn because you got a motion on the floor.
So I'm just talking about ideas and options here, so.
With what Mr. Richardson brought to light, I think at this point, it would probably be wise to withdraw that motion that I made. Having staff work with property owners, legal representative, to develop a plan that would provide us with the exceptions that would be fitting for this property.
Okay, I would withdraw my second. So, Mr. Staff, go ahead. Dale?
This may be because it's my last plan commission. I'm just trying to figure out how staff is gonna craft anything that's different. We've heard from the neighborhood multiple times, they don't want anything different. So would the direction be that the planning commission generally thinks that other uses more intense than general office are appropriate, and you're delegating that decision to staff to come back with with a proposed PO, and then you would evaluate that at the time? I'm just trying to figure out how we're gonna be any different at a meeting in a month than we will be today.
My thinking would be this, is that the general feeling is that we want to go limited commercial. But in the process, we need to figure out what items that the applicant would be more than willing to withdraw from that, so that if they want to put together a protective overlay, eliminating controversial or obviously business items that would not be appropriate for this, then they could do that by virtue of protective overlay and bring it back to us with a new recommendation.
My suggestion is that this planning commission already recommended LC at one time with a PO that had use exceptions. We could go back to that as a starting point.
How soon do we just leave it open as to how soon to bring it back, or?
I think you should defer it to a specific date, whether it's the next meeting or in a month.
Okay, Mr. Dewell?
I would suggest if you're gonna do that, staff, work with the applicant before you come back with anything else, because I don't think it makes a lot of sense for the staff to come up with something that we don't see right now and the applicant also doesn't want.
Absolutely, yeah.
I might just comment with that. We have been attempting to work with the applicant, and we will attempt to do so again.
Is the other motion withdrawn?
Yes, it has been
Yeah.
withdrawn.
I'd make a motion, we defer this for 30 days. So whatever meeting,
That'd be the January 23rd.
January 23rd meeting.
Okay.
I second.
Second by Mr. Nix. Any additional questions, comments? All those, Mr. Green?
It comes back on the 23rd, and it'll be another general hearing, like we did today, or we could close the meeting.
We're
now,
making
or-
changes, so we would have to
It'll
hear
be
those changes.
it'll be a different application, and so you would want to take testimony and, yeah.
Mr. Foster?
Are we okay on the time frame if we're saying a different application? Scott, is that?
Sure. Certainly staff can come up with a recommendation. Our response from the applicant up until now has been nothing. So we will attempt to work with them on overlay, but I can't promise you that will happen because we attempted to do that in advance of this meeting and received no response.
Mr. Foster?
I don't care what you do with the protective overlay, but in no way will that serve as a buffer for this residential neighborhood. I would not support any type of LC zoning for this.
Can I offer a substitute motion to deny?
Yes, you can offer that. We haven't made a vote on the deferred yet, so is there a second to deny? Motion dies for lack of second. Okay, we have a second to deny. Any discussion on the denial? Those in favor of the motion to deny, raise your right hand, or raise hand. 4. Those opposed to the motion to deny? Motion fails 7-4.
Who were the
Florence, Mr. Florence. Okay, now we're back to the motion to defer to January 23rd. Those in favor of that motion, uplifted hand. No? Okay. Those opposed? 4, Miles, Foster, Dewell, and Richardson. Motion passes. Next item, please.
Good afternoon. This Matt Williams, Associate Planner. This is conditional use 2019-34. This is a rehearing. This case was sent back by the City Council. Just as a reminder, the applicant is requesting a conditional use to expand outdoor vehicle sales and equipment sales on his property. The subject property is zoned limited commercial, and outdoor vehicle and equipment sales may be permitted with a conditional use within this LC zoning. A conditional use for vehicle sales was approved for a portion of this site back in 2004. This case would allow for an expansion of that. DAB 3 reviewed this request on October 2nd and recommended denial on a 7-2 vote. The Planning Commission originally reviewed this application at their October 10th meeting and approved as recommended by staff on a 6-5 vote. After deferring the case once, on December 3rd, City Council voted to return this case to the Planning Commission following the adoption of the South Central Neighborhood Plan. That plan lists used car lots as, or describes them as a least desirable land use and strongly discourages them from being allowed. That plan was just adopted on December 5th at the Planning Commission with a vote of 13-0. So based on that adopted future land use map in the South Central Neighborhood Plan that strongly discourages used car lots, I'm just stating that. But because this is an expansion of an existing use, staff is recommending approval. Again,
Questions for staff?
Here is the site real quick. You can see that interior portion with the black outline. That is what is currently allowed to have the conditional use for used car lots. And the application is for the expanded portions on the north and south of that. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Richardson?
So your staff is recommending approval of the original application, or by that I mean the narrow part, or of the expansion, Matt?
Because this is already an existing use and it already has an approved conditional use, we are recommending the approval of the expansion of that use. So on the map here, the center portion, I believe these are 3 lots, so the center portion is already approved and is operating right now. We're recommending expansion to the north and to the south.
But he's been using the north and the south for several years in violation of his previous approval, has he not?
That's what I've heard from the zoning department, that somebody went in to get a license for the sale of cars, and then it was noticed that the operation was on the expanded portion and not just the approved portion. And so that's why we're here today, trying to get the expanded portion approved. Currently, he is not operating on the expanded portion because of this process.
Any additional questions? Mr. Florence?
This is a new owner, am I right?
I am not sure how, I'll let the applicant just talk about that. I'm not sure how long he's owned this property.
Mr. Richardson?
We had a new handout on our table. Can you tell me how that's changed from the one we got in our packet a week ago?
I noticed this morning that the staff report that was in the hallway had been printed awkwardly. It only was showing every other page. So I just wanted to make sure everybody had the full staff report. The staff report hasn't changed. I just wanted to make sure everybody had the correct one.
My printed copy was the same way, although the emailed copy was okay, so.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Thank you. Agent or applicant?
Sandy Roberts, 1950 South Webb Road, and I'm the agent for the owner. Since the original meeting, we have submitted landscape plan meeting the requirements of the write-up. And other than that, I don't have any statement.
Any questions from Mr. Roberts? Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate that. Anybody in the audience wish to speak on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Matthew Johnson, 1106 South Waco. And
I'm simply here as a resident of the neighborhood to lift up the neighborhood plan that we approved, that you all approved not too long ago. And again, this desire to limit any more expansion of used car lots in the neighborhood. And just to emphasize, the neighborhood is rallying together to find other businesses, to see other economic development happen in the neighborhood. Has been very proactive.